The train screamed into Red Hollow just after 4 o'clock on a Tuesday that felt like the end of the world. Evelyn Mercer pressed her face against the window, watching the frontier town materialize through clouds of rust-colored dust. 27 years of factory smoke and Pittsburgh winters had taught her what disappointment looked like, but nothing prepared her for this. A collection of weathered buildings squatting beneath an enormous sky, surrounded by emptiness so vast it made her chest hurt. The letter was still folded in her pocket. She'd read it so many times the creases had worn soft as cloth. Dear Miss Mercer, I own 300 acres of grazing land in Montana Territory. Good water, strong cabin. I'm looking for a wife willing to work hard and build something permanent. I won't lie, the frontier breaks people. But if you're tougher than you look, there's a life here worth having. Yours in earnest, Gideon Cross. Evelyn touched the letter through her dress pocket as the train lurched to a stop. Around her, other passengers gathered belongings. A merchant with sample cases, a family heading to Oregon, 2 cowboys sleeping off whiskey. None of them looked at her. They never did. She was plain. She knew that. Thin from years of missed meals, with dark hair she kept pinned tight and hands scarred from sewing machine accidents. Pretty girls got marriage proposals delivered by neighbors. Girls like Evelyn got letters from strangers offering partnership instead of love. She'd said yes anyway. Not because Gideon's words moved her, not because she believed in frontier romance or new beginnings. She said yes because Pittsburgh was killing her one 12-hour shift at a time, and at least Montana promised a different way to die. The platform was empty when she stepped down. Evelyn stood beside her trunk, scanning faces that didn't scan back. A few townspeople moved past without stopping. An old man sat outside the general store, whittling. Nobody approached. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. The train departed in a cloud of black smoke, leaving her alone with her trunk and the growing certainty that something had gone very wrong. You waiting for someone? Evelyn turned. The man who'd spoken was maybe 60, with a marshal's badge half hidden beneath a dusty coat. His eyes weren't unkind, but they held something that made her stomach drop. Gideon Cross, she said. He was supposed to meet me. The marshal's expression changed. You're the girl from his letter. I'm the woman he asked to marry. Jesus Christ. The marshal took off his hat, ran a hand through thinning hair. Ma'am, I'm real sorry, but Gideon's dead. Died 3 weeks back in a riding accident. Horse threw him near Copper Ridge, broke his neck. The words hit like cold water. Evelyn heard them, understood them, but her body refused to react properly. She just stood there on the platform while the Montana wind pulled at her dress and the sun hammered down on her uncovered head. There's a boarding house in town, the marshal continued. Mrs. Chen runs it. I can help you with your trunk, get you settled until... Until what? Evelyn's voice came out flat. Until I go back east? Back to the factory? I don't know your situation, ma'am, but there's nothing for you here. There was supposed to be a ranch. There is, but it's falling apart, and Gideon's brother sure as hell won't want... His brother? The marshal nodded slowly. Rowan Cross. He showed up 2 days after Gideon died. Hadn't seen him in near 8 years. They had some kind of falling out before Rowan took to drifting. Now he's back, trying to settle affairs before the bank takes everything. Where is he? Probably drunk at the Silver Bell or out at the ranch pretending he knows how to fix fences. Look, Miss Mercer, I understand you came a long way, but Rowan ain't the settling type. Man's got more ghosts than a graveyard. You'd be smart to take the next train east and forget, I need to see him. The marshal studied her for a long moment. Whatever he saw made him sigh. Silver Bell's 2 blocks south, can't miss it. But don't say I didn't warn you. The saloon smelled like spilled beer and decades of tobacco smoke. Evelyn pushed through the doors into dim lamplight and stopped just inside, letting her eyes adjust. A dozen men occupied the space, drinking, playing cards, arguing about cattle prices. Most didn't notice her. The ones who did stared like she'd wandered in from another planet. Help you, miss? The bartender was a broad woman with gray-streaked hair and a face that had seen everything twice. I'm looking for Rowan Cross. You and half the creditors in the territory. The woman jerked her head toward a corner table. Back there. Though if you're smart, you'll turn around before he notices you. Evelyn walked past the bar, past the card players, toward the man sitting alone in the shadows. He didn't look up when she stopped at his table. Rowan Cross was bigger than she'd expected, broad-shouldered and tall even sitting down, with dark hair that needed cutting and a beard that needed trimming. His clothes were dusty, his hands scarred, and there was a stillness about him that reminded Evelyn of coiled rope just before it snapped. A half-empty whiskey bottle sat in front of him. "Rowan Cross? Unless you're here to foreclose on something, go away." His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it properly in days. Evelyn pulled out this chair across from him and sat down. That got his attention. He looked up slowly, and Evelyn found herself staring into eyes the color of winter storms, gray and cold and absolutely empty of anything resembling welcome. "I'm Evelyn Mercer," she said. "Your brother sent for me." Something flickered across Rowan's face. Recognition, maybe. Or pain. It was gone before she could name it. "You're the mail-order bride." "I'm the woman he asked to come west, yes." Rowan laughed once, a sound with no humor in it. Jesus, Gideon actually went through with it. He poured more whiskey into his glass, didn't offer her any. "You're about 3 weeks late for the wedding and 2 weeks late for the funeral. Guess nobody thought to send you a telegram. I'm sorry for your loss." "Are you?" It wasn't a question. Evelyn kept her hands folded on the table, her back straight. Years of surviving factory foreman had taught her not to flinch. "I came here for a reason. That reason's dead, but the ranch isn't. The ranch is dying." "Then sell it." "Can't. It's underwater. Gideon borrowed against it last year when the cattle market crashed. Bank's going to take it in 30 days whether I want them to or not." "What about the land? Someone must want—" "Oh, somebody wants it." Rowan drained his glass. "Silas Granger's been circling like a vulture since before Gideon's body was cold. Man owns half the territory already. Figures he might as well own the rest." "Who's Silas Granger?" "Trouble in a black coat, the kind of man who smiles while he's ruining you." Rowan finally looked at her properly. "Look, Miss Mercer, I appreciate you coming all this way, but there's nothing here for you. Ranch is collapsing, town's dying. I'll give you money for a ticket back to wherever you came from, and we can both pretend this never happened." "I don't want your money." "Then what the hell do you want?" Evelyn met his eyes and didn't blink. "I want to see the ranch." "Why?" "Because I crossed half the country to get here. Because I left everything behind. Because I'm not going back east to die in a factory when I could just as easily die out here trying to build something." She leaned forward. "I don't know you, Mr. Cross. I didn't know your brother. But I know what it's like to have nothing and nowhere to go. So before I give up and crawl back to Pittsburgh, I want to see what I traveled 1,200 miles for." Rowan stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. "You're serious?" "Completely." He shook his head slowly. "The place is falling apart. Roof leaks. Fences are down. Most of the cattle wandered off or got killed by wolves. You'll take one look and realize how stupid this idea is." "Probably. But I want to see it anyway." Something shifted behind Rowan's eyes. Not warmth exactly, but a kind of tired resignation. He stood up, grabbed his hat from the table. "Fine. We'll ride out now while there's still daylight. But when you change your mind, don't say I didn't warn you." They rode in silence. Rowan had found her a horse, an old mare named Bess, who was gentle enough for someone who'd never ridden before. Evelyn gripped the saddle horn and tried not to fall off while Rowan's horse moved ahead with easy confidence. The landscape opened up around them like something from a fever dream. Rolling grasslands stretched toward mountains that looked painted against the sky. Everything was bigger here, wider. The air itself felt different, thinner, cleaner, full of distances that made Pittsburgh's cramped streets seem like a child's memory. "You know how to ride?" Rowan asked without turning around. "I'm learning." "You know how to cook? Clean? Mend fences? Shoot?" "I can sew." "I can clean. The rest I'll figure out." The frontier doesn't give you time to figure things out. It kills you first and asks questions later. "Then I'll die learning." Rowan glanced back at her, something almost like respect crossing his face before he turned forward again. They rode for another hour. Evelyn's legs screamed, her back ached. Blisters were forming on her palms. She didn't complain. The ranch appeared as the sun started sinking toward the mountains. Even from a distance, Evelyn could see the decay. The cabin sagged in the middle like a broken back. The barn looked one strong wind away from collapse. Fencing lay in pieces across dead grass. A few skeletal cattle grazed near a muddy stream. It was a disaster. Rowan pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of the property. There it is, 300 acres of pure failure. Still want to stay? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She studied the cabin, the barn, the mountains rising behind them. Calculated the work it would take to fix the roof, rebuild the fences, plant a garden. Thought about winter coming and whether the cabin could survive it. Then she thought about Pittsburgh. The factory floors slick with machine oil. The foreman who put his hands where they didn't belong. The boarding house room she shared with 3 other girls, where bedbugs lived in the mattress and rats scratched inside the walls. The future waiting there. Years of grinding poverty until her hands gave out or her lungs filled with cotton dust and she died poor and alone and forgotten. I've lived worse places, Evelyn said quietly. Rowan turned in his saddle, really looking at her for the first time. You're out of your mind. Probably. You'll last a week, maybe 2 if you're stubborn. Then I'll fail trying something instead of succeeding at nothing. For a long moment, Rowan just stared at her. Then he shook his head and rode toward the cabin. Evelyn followed. Yes. The inside of the cabin was worse than the outside. Dust covered everything. Cobwebs hung in corners. The iron stove was cold and rusty. A table with 3 legs leaned against the wall. One small bedroom sat empty except for a bed frame with no mattress. Mice had been living in the cupboards. Gideon wasn't much for housekeeping, Rowan said from the doorway. Evelyn walked through the space slowly, taking inventory. The walls were solid. The floor needed scrubbing but wasn't rotted through. There was a pump near the door that might still work. Windows, filthy but unbroken. Where's your brother buried? The question caught Rowan off guard. His expression closed down. Ridge behind the barn. Didn't see the point in town cemetery. Can I see it? Why? Because I should pay respects to the man who brought me here, even if I never met him. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. This way. They walked behind the barn to a small rise overlooking the valley. A wooden cross marked the spot, rough-carved, unvarnished, with Gideon's name burned into the wood. Evelyn stood there quietly while Rowan shifted his weight from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable. What was he like? She asked. Gideon? Yes. Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, stubborn, idealistic. Believed he could make something out of nothing if he just worked hard enough. His voice went rough. Turns out he was wrong. You blame yourself. I wasn't here. Would it have mattered if you were? Rowan's hands clenched. We fought before I left. Said things we shouldn't have. I spent 8 years riding from town to town, telling myself I didn't care what happened to him. Then I get a telegram saying he's dead, and suddenly I'm standing over his grave, realizing I wasted all that time being angry instead of... He stopped, shook his head. Doesn't matter now. Evelyn touched the wooden cross gently. I think your brother would have been a good man to know. You never met him? No. But he wrote me an honest letter. Didn't promise fantasy or romance. Just said the work was hard and the life was harder, but it was worth having if you were strong enough. She looked at Rowan. That takes courage. Not many men admit the truth about themselves. Rowan's expression was unreadable. You should have met him instead of me. Maybe, but I didn't. The sun was setting now, painting the valley in shades of copper and gold. The mountains turned purple against the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. I'll sleep in the barn tonight, Rowan said abruptly. You can have the cabin. There's some canned goods in the cupboard. Not much, but enough for a few days. Tomorrow, I'll take you back to town, get you set up at the boarding house until the next train comes through. I'm not leaving. Miss Mercer. Evelyn. And I'm not leaving. Rowan's frustration was visible. You don't understand what you're asking for. This place will break you. The work, the isolation, the winters, they'll grind you down until there's nothing left. Then I'll break trying, but I'm not going back east. Why? His voice rose. Why throw your life away on a dead man's dream? Because it's better than throwing it away on no dream at all. The words came out harder than she intended. They hung in the evening air between them. Evelyn took a breath, steadied herself. You want to know why I'm staying? Because in Pittsburgh, I worked 14 hours a day in a textile factory for wages that barely covered a bed in a room with 3 other women. Because the foreman cornered me in the storage room twice before I learned to carry scissors in my pocket. Because I'm 27 years old and everyone back east looks at me like I'm already expired goods. Her hand shook slightly. She pressed them together. Your brother offered me something nobody else ever did. Not romance, not rescue, just honest work and fair partnership. Maybe that doesn't sound like much to you, but to me it sounded like the first real choice I'd ever been given. So yes, I traveled 1,200 miles to marry a man I'd never met. And yes, I arrived too late. But I'm still here, and I'm still choosing this, even if it's hard, even if it breaks me, even if you think I'm crazy for trying. Rowan stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You really mean it, he said slowly, every word. He turned away, looked out at the darkening valley. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I'm leaving in 30 days. Soon as the bank takes the property. I've got no intention of staying here watching everything Gideon built turn to dust. Then leave. I'll stay anyway. Alone? A woman alone on a failing ranch in the middle of nowhere? If that's what it takes.
Rowan shook his head. You'll be dead before winter. Maybe. But at least I'll die trying something instead of rotting away in a factory. Silence settled between them again. Finally, Rowan turned back toward the cabin. Come on, it's getting dark. They walked back without speaking. Rowan showed her how to work the pump where the firewood was stacked, how to light the stove. His instructions were brief, mechanical, like he was trying not to think too hard about what he was doing. I'll be in the barn if you need anything, he said from the doorway. Don't wander outside after dark. Wolves come down from the mountains sometimes. Rowan. He stopped but didn't turn around. Thank you, Evelyn said, for not forcing me to leave. His shoulders tensed. Don't thank me yet. You'll change your mind when reality hits. Then he was gone, disappearing into the purple twilight. Evelyn stood alone in the empty cabin, listening to the silence. It was absolute, no factory machinery, no street noise, no voices from neighboring rooms, just wind moving through grass and the distant sound of the stream. She sat down on the dusty floor and let herself feel the weight of what she'd done. 1,200 miles from home. No money, no prospects, no family, just a dead man's ranch and his living brother who wanted nothing to do with her. Her hands were shaking now. She pressed them against her face and allowed herself exactly 1 minute of fear. 1 minute to acknowledge the enormity of the gamble she'd just made. Then she stood up, found a bucket, and started carrying water from the pump. If she was going to die trying, she might as well start by cleaning. Teastal. Evelyn worked until her arms gave out. She scrubbed the floor on her hands and knees, swept cobwebs from corners, emptied mouse droppings from cupboards. The stove needed blacking. The windows needed washing. Everything smelled like years of neglect. Around midnight, she collapsed on the bare bed frame, too exhausted even to notice the missing mattress. She was asleep in seconds, and woke to the sound of gunfire. Evelyn sat up, heart hammering, completely disoriented. Darkness pressed against the windows. More shots echoed from somewhere outside. Sharp cracks that made her ears ring. She stumbled to the door, pulled it open. The yard was lit by moonlight. Rowan stood near the barn with a rifle, firing toward the tree line. Evelyn couldn't see what he was shooting at, but she heard something large crashing through brush. More shots. Then silence. Rowan lowered the rifle, breathing hard. He didn't move for a long moment, just stood there scanning the darkness. Evelyn stepped outside. What happened? He turned sharply, rifle coming halfway up before he recognized her. Get back inside. What were you shooting at? Wolves. They were circling the cattle. He walked toward her, still holding the rifle. I told you not to come outside. I heard gunfire. I thought... You thought what? That you could help? His voice was harsh. This is what I meant. The frontier doesn't care about your courage or your stubbornness. It'll kill you while you're still trying to figure out which end of the rifle to hold. Evelyn lifted her chin. Then teach me. What? Teach me to shoot. Teach me to defend this place. If I'm staying, I need to learn. Rowan stared at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. You're serious. I don't say things I don't mean. He ran a hand through his hair. clearly frustrated. Miss Mercer. Evelyn. Evelyn. You can't just... He stopped, started again. Learning to shoot takes time. Patience. Most women... Don't tell me what most women do. Tell me what I need to know to survive here. Rowan's jaw worked. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he sighed, a sound of pure exasperation. Fine. Tomorrow, after breakfast, I'll show you how not to shoot yourself in the foot. He pointed the rifle at the cabin. Now get back inside before something else decides to visit. Evelyn nodded and turned to go. Hey. She looked back. Rowan's expression was unreadable in the moonlight. You cleaned the cabin. It needed it. Yeah, it did. He was quiet for a moment. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be harder than you think. Evelyn went back inside, closed the door, and leaned against it. Her heart was still racing from the gunfire. Her hand still trembled slightly, but underneath the fear something else was growing. Determination. She'd survived Pittsburgh. She'd survived this. And somehow she'd make Rowan Cross believe she belonged here. Dawn came cold and gray. Evelyn woke stiff and aching, every muscle protesting the previous day's ride and the night spent on a bare bed frame. She stood slowly, stretching, then made her way outside. Rowan was already awake, working on the corral fence with a hammer. He didn't acknowledge her, just kept driving nails with methodical precision. Evelyn walked to the pump, filled a bucket, splashed cold water on her face. The shock of it helped clear the fog from her mind. There's coffee in the barn, Rowan called without looking up, and some hardtack if you're hungry. Thank you. She found the coffee, bitter and strong enough to strip paint, and the hardtack, which was exactly as appetizing as it sounded, but it was food, and she ate it without complaint. When she came back outside, Rowan had finished with the fence. He was loading the rifle. You still want to learn? He asked. Yes. He handed her the rifle. It's heavier than you think. He was right. The weapon pulled at her arms immediately. Evelyn adjusted her grip, trying to find balance. Not like that. Rowan stepped behind her, reached around to reposition her hands. His touch was impersonal, mechanical, but Evelyn felt heat crawl up her neck anyway. Butt against your shoulder, finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. See that fence post? Evelyn squinted down the barrel at a post maybe 50 yards away. Breathe steady, squeeze the trigger, don't pull, and for Christ's sake, don't close your eyes. She fired. The recoil nearly knocked her backward. The shot went wide, kicking up dirt 10 feet left of the target. Again. She fired again, missed again, and again, and again. By the 10th shot, her shoulder was bruised and her ears were ringing, but the last bullet hit the post. Better, Rowan said. It wasn't praise exactly, but it wasn't criticism either. They spent the next hour practicing. Rowan showed her how to reload, how to compensate for wind, how to steady her breathing. He didn't coddle her or offer encouragement. He just corrected her mistakes and expected her to learn. Evelyn preferred it that way. Around mid-morning, a rider appeared on the ridge. Rowan's entire demeanor changed. His hand moved to the revolver on his hip and the easy instruction vanished from his face. Get behind me, he said quietly. Who is it? Trouble? The rider came closer, resolving into a man dressed entirely in black. Black hat, black coat, black horse. He moved with the confidence of someone who owned everything he looked at. Rowan Cross, the man called out. Been meaning to ride out and pay my respects. Granger. Rowan's voice was flat. You've paid them. Now leave. Silas Granger smiled. He was handsome in a cold way, with sharp features and pale eyes that missed nothing. When those eyes landed on Evelyn, she felt something crawl across her skin. And who might this be? None of your business. Now, Rowan, that's no way to talk. I'm just being neighborly. Granger tipped his hat to Evelyn. Silas Granger, ma'am. I own most of the land around here. Always a pleasure to meet new arrivals. Evelyn didn't respond. Granger's smile widened. The silent type. I respect that. He turned his attention back to Rowan. I heard you were trying to settle Gideon's affairs. Thought I might be able to help with that. We don't need your help. You sure? Because from where I'm sitting, you've got about 30 days before the bank forecloses. And I happen to know they'll sell the property for pennies on the dollar just to clear the books. He paused. I could make you an offer. A good one. Enough to start fresh somewhere else. Property's not for sale. Everything's for sale, Rowan. It's just a question of price. Then the price is go to hell. Granger's smile never wavered, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. That's unfortunate. I was hoping we could settle this like gentlemen, but if you're determined to make things difficult, he looked at Evelyn again. Ma'am, you seem like a reasonable person. Perhaps you could talk some sense into your friend here before he makes a decision he'll regret. She's not my friend, Rowan said. She's just passing through. Is that so? Granger tilted his head. Funny. I heard you brought a woman up from town yesterday. Heard she was Gideon's mail order bride, which would make her part owner of this property, legally speaking. Wouldn't it? The implication hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn felt Rowan tense beside her. Get off my land, Granger. Not your land yet. Still the bank's. But I'll leave. Granger gathered his reins. Think about my offer, Rowan. It's the best one you're going to get. And Miss... He paused, waiting. Mercer, Evelyn said quietly. Miss Mercer. If you find yourself in need of assistance, my door's always open. Red Hollow can be awfully hard on women without protection. He rode away without waiting for a response. Evelyn and Rowan stood in silence until Granger disappeared over the ridge. That's who wants the ranch? Evelyn asked. That's who wants everything. Rowan's voice was tight. Man's been buying up properties across the territory for years, mostly through legal tricks and intimidation. Anyone who refuses to sell usually has accidents, fires, missing cattle, sometimes worse. And if you don't sell, then we find out what worse means. Evelyn absorbed that. He called me part owner. You're not. Legally, Gideon's property goes to me since you never married. But Granger thinks I might have a claim. Granger thinks a lot of things, most of them wrong. Rowan turned to her. This is your chance to leave, right now, before this gets uglier than it already is. I'll take you to town, buy you a train ticket, and you can forget you ever came west. Is that what you want? The question seemed to catch him off guard. What I want doesn't matter. It does to me. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. What I want is for you to be smart enough to save yourself while you still can. Then you're going to be disappointed. His jaw clenched. You don't know what you're getting into. No, but neither did you when you came back here. She met his eyes steadily. You could have stayed away. Let the bank take the ranch. Let Granger win. But you came back anyway. Why? Rowan didn't answer. I'll tell you why, Evelyn continued. Because part of you still cares about this place, about your brother's memory, about not letting men like Granger take everything without a fight. That's not... It is. And if you're staying to fight, then so am I. Why? The word came out almost angry. Why would you fight for something that's not even yours? Because it could be, Evelyn said simply. Because for the first time in my life, I have a choice about my future. Maybe I'll fail. Maybe Granger will win. Maybe the bank will take everything and I'll end up right back where I started. But at least I'll know I tried. Rowan shook his head slowly. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't. But something in his expression had shifted. Not warmth, exactly. Not acceptance. But maybe the beginning of something like respect. Fine, he said finally. You want to stay? Then you work, you learn, and you do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. Because out here, hesitation gets you killed. Understood? Understood. Good. He picked up the rifle. Now let's see if you can hit that fence post 10 times in a row without shooting yourself. Evelyn took the rifle and smiled. It was the first time she'd smiled since arriving in Montana. And as the morning sun climbed higher and the mountains turned gold in the distance, Evelyn Mercer realized something important. She'd come west looking for a new life. But standing there with a rifle in her hands and a man who barely tolerated her teaching her to survive, she understood the truth. The life she'd been looking for wasn't waiting to be found. It was waiting to be built. One shot at a time. The first week nearly killed her. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just the slow, grinding destruction of every muscle, every callus, every assumption Evelyn had ever made about her own strength. She woke before dawn every morning to the sound of Rowan already working, hammering fence posts, chopping wood, hauling water. By the time she dragged herself outside, he'd usually finished half the day's labor without acknowledging she existed. Pump needs priming, he'd say without looking at her. Or chickens need feeding. Or stove's out again. No good morning. No, how did you sleep? Just tasks delivered like orders and an expectation she'd figure them out. Evelyn figured them out. She learned to prime the pump by watching Rowan do it once, then doing it herself 6 times until her arm shook. She learned which chickens pecked and which ones just squawked. She learned to keep the stove burning through the night by banking coals properly, though she went through half the firewood supply before she got it right. Her hands blistered. Then the blisters popped. Then they turned to calluses. She fell off Bess twice trying to ride to the stream. The second time she hit hard enough to see stars, but she got back on anyway because Rowan was watching from the barn and she'd be damned if she'd give him the satisfaction of seeing her quit. You're going to break your neck, he said that evening. Probably. That doesn't bother you? Not as much as going back to Pittsburgh. He'd shaken his head and walked away, but she caught something in his expression that might have been approval, or maybe just disbelief. With Rowan, it was hard to tell. By the end of that first week, Evelyn could barely stand. Her back screamed. Her legs felt like someone had beaten them with boards. She had bruises in places she didn't know could bruise. But she also had a garden plot cleared, 3 loads of laundry done, and a cabin that no longer smelled like abandonment.
You're still here, Rowan said on Sunday morning, the first full sentence he had directed at her in days. Did you think I wouldn't be? Honestly, yes. Evelyn dumped another bucket of water into the washtub. How long until you believe I'm staying? Ask me in a month. I'll still be here in a month. We'll see.
But something had shifted. Rowan still didn't talk much, still kept his distance, still worked himself half to death every day like he was trying to outrun something. But he stopped suggesting she leave. He stopped treating her presence like a temporary inconvenience. Instead, he started teaching her. Not gently, not patiently, but thoroughly. He showed her how to mend fence without wasting wire, how to spot a lame horse before it went fully bad, how to read weather in the way clouds stacked against the mountains, how to handle the rifle until she could load and fire without thinking about it. You're going to need to ride into town tomorrow, he said one morning while they were fixing a section of corral. We're out of flour, salt, and coffee, and we need nails. You want me to go alone? I need to stay here and finish this fence before the cattle break through again. Can you handle it? Evelyn considered. She'd ridden Bess around the property plenty now, but never to town, never alone. How far is it? 6 miles. Follow the creek until it meets the main road, then straight south. You'll see the church steeple about a mile out. What if I get lost? Then you'll learn real quick how to find your way. He hammered another nail. I'll write a list. Take money from the jar in the cabin. And Evelyn? She looked at him. Keep the rifle with you. You think Granger... I don't think anything. I'm being practical. Woman alone on frontier roads makes an easy target for anyone looking for easy targets. The words should have scared her. Instead, they felt almost like concern. I'll be careful, she said. See that you are. The next morning, Evelyn rode toward Red Hollow with the rifle across her saddle and Rowan's shopping list folded in her pocket. The early sun turned the grasslands gold. Meadowlarks sang from fence posts. The mountains stood sharp against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. For the first time since arriving, Evelyn felt something close to peace. Then she saw the smoke. It rose from somewhere ahead, thick and black against the clean sky. Evelyn urged Bess faster, her heart starting to pound. The smoke came from the Henderson place, a small ranch about 3 miles from the Cross property. Evelyn had never met the Hendersons, but Rowan had mentioned them once. Young couple. 2 kids. Barely scraping by. Their barn was burning. Evelyn pulled Bess to a stop at the edge of the property, taking in the scene. The barn was already half collapsed, flames eating through what remained. A woman stood in the yard holding 2 small children, all 3 of them crying. A man, presumably Mr. Henderson, was trying to salvage equipment from the wreckage, his face black with soot. No one else was there. No neighbors. No help. Evelyn dismounted and ran toward them. Are you hurt? She called. The woman spun around, eyes red from smoke and tears. Who are you? Evelyn Mercer. I'm staying at the Cross Ranch. What happened? I don't know. The woman's voice shook. We woke up and it was already burning. Thomas tried to put it out, but it spread too fast. Everything's gone. The hay, the tools, She broke down completely. Evelyn looked at the burning barn,
then at the terrified children, then made a decision. Do you have buckets? What? Buckets! We need to keep the fire from spreading to the cabin. It's too late. We can't. We can try. Where are your buckets? Something in Evelyn's voice cut through the woman's panic. She pointed toward the cabin with a shaking hand. For the next 2 hours, Evelyn worked alongside the Hendersons, hauling water from their creek and throwing it on the cabin walls to keep the fire from jumping. They couldn't save the barn, but they saved everything else. By the time the barn collapsed into smoking ruins, Evelyn's dress was soaked and filthy, her face streaked with soot, her arms screaming from carrying water. Thomas Henderson stood looking at the wreckage with hollow eyes. We're finished. Everything we had was in there. The feed, the winter supplies, the tools. He trailed off. Do you have family? Evelyn asked. My brother in Oregon, but we don't have money for passage. And even if we did, he gestured at the burned barn. Who'd buy this place now? Evelyn looked at the smoking ruins, at the exhausted family, at the impossible situation. Did you see anyone around before the fire started? No. Why? Just wondering if it might have been set deliberately. Thomas's head snapped up. You think someone did this on purpose? I don't know, but I've heard Silas Granger's been buying up properties around here. Has he made you an offer? The look on Thomas's face was answer enough. 3 weeks ago, he said quietly. Offered half what the place is worth. I told him no. He said I'd regret it. His hands clenched. You think he burned my barn? I think it's a hell of a coincidence if he didn't. Thomas's wife, her name was Mary, Evelyn learned, let out a choked sound that was half laugh, half sob. What are we supposed to do? We can't prove anything. And even if we could, Granger owns the law around here. The marshal doesn't work for him, Evelyn said. The marshal won't go against him. Nobody does. That's why Granger gets away with everything. Evelyn wanted to argue, but she couldn't. She'd seen the fear in people's eyes when Granger's name came up. She'd felt it herself. Come to our place, she heard herself say. All 3 adults stared at her. What? Thomas said. Come to the Cross Ranch. We have space in the barn. It's not much, but it's shelter. And we can share supplies until you figure out what to do next. We couldn't possibly... You can. And you will. Because leaving you here with 2 children and no barn is how people die on the frontier. Evelyn surprised herself with the certainty in her voice. Gather what you can carry. I'll ride ahead and tell Rowan you're coming. Rowan Cross. Thomas's expression shifted. He's back? You know him? Know of him. He left years ago after some kind of fight with his brother. Heard he came back when Gideon died. Thomas hesitated. Is he taking over the ranch? We're trying to save it, both of us. Mary looked at Evelyn with new interest. You're the mail-order bride, the one who came for Gideon. I am. But you stayed anyway. I did. Mary's expression softened slightly. Why? Evelyn thought about that. Because I'd rather try and fail here than succeed at barely surviving somewhere else. The words hung in the smoky air. Finally, Thomas nodded. We'll come, but just until we can figure something out. We won't be charity cases. I'm not offering charity, I'm offering help. There's a difference. Evelyn rode back to the Cross Ranch faster than she'd ridden anywhere, pushing Bess harder than she should have. Rowan was working on the fence when she arrived, and his expression darkened the moment he saw her. What happened? You're covered in soot. The Henderson barn burned down. I helped them try to save their cabin. Is anyone hurt? No. But they've lost everything. I told them they could stay in our barn until they figure out what to do. Rowan's face went very still. You what? They have 2 small children, Rowan. I couldn't just leave them there. So you invited strangers to move onto property we're about to lose? They're not strangers. They're neighbors. We don't have neighbors. We have people competing for the same scraps. He threw down his hammer. Did it occur to you that maybe I should have been consulted before you started offering shelter we can't afford to give? Did it occur to you that maybe some things are more important than property? Easy to say when it's not your property you're giving away. The words hit harder than he probably intended. Evelyn felt her face flush. You're right, she said quietly. It's not my property. It's yours, which means you can tell them no when they arrive.
I'm sure they'll understand that a dying ranch can't afford basic human decency. She turned toward the cabin. Evelyn? She stopped but didn't turn around. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. How bad was the fire? Bad. The barn's completely gone. They barely saved the cabin. Anyone see how it started? No, but Thomas said Granger made him an offer 3 weeks ago. He refused. Rowan swore under his breath. Of course he did. That's Granger's pattern. Make an offer, get refused. Then something unfortunate happens and suddenly the property's worth half what it was. So you believe me that they need help? I believe you that they need help. I also believe we're barely surviving ourselves. He picked up his hammer again. But I won't turn them away. Just next time maybe ask before you start redistributing our resources. Our resources? The words slipped out before Evelyn could stop them. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he didn't correct himself. They can use the barn loft. It's dry and there's space, but they pull their weight. Everyone works. I'll tell them. And Evelyn? He finally looked at her. You did good, helping them, even if it was stupid. It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd ever given her. Thank you, she said. The Hendersons arrived that afternoon with everything they owned loaded into a wagon that looked ready to fall apart. Rowan helped them unload while Evelyn made space in the barn loft and tried to figure out how to stretch their food supplies to feed 6 people instead of 2. That night, they all ate together, a thin stew that was mostly potatoes and hope. The Henderson children, a boy of 6 and a girl of 4, stared at Rowan with wide eyes like he might bite them. This is very kind of you, Mary said quietly, taking us in like this. Evelyn's doing, Rowan muttered. I just agreed not to throw you out. Rowan, Evelyn said sharply. He looked at her, and something passed between them that the Hendersons couldn't quite read. What I mean, Rowan continued, slightly less hostile, is that you're welcome to stay as long as you need. But things are tight here. We're all going to have to work harder than we probably want to. We're not afraid of work, Thomas said, and we'll pay you back, somehow. Just help me fix that fence line tomorrow, and we'll call it even. After dinner, Evelyn walked outside to get air. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like someone had spilled salt. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Rowan approaching. They're good people, he said without preamble. I know. Granger's going to come after them. He doesn't like it when people refuse him. He's already after us. What's 2 more? Rowan almost smiled. Almost. You really don't think things through, do you? I think them through fine. I just come to different conclusions than you do. Reckless conclusions. Brave conclusions. There's a fine line between brave and stupid. Good thing I'm walking it then. This time Rowan did smile, just a little. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less haunted. You're impossible, he said. So are you. They stood there in the darkness, not quite comfortable but not quite uncomfortable either. Something was shifting between them, slow as geological time, but just as inevitable. I'm glad you helped them, Rowan said finally, even if it complicates everything. Doing the right thing usually does. He nodded slowly, then turned back toward the barn. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be harder than today. Every day is harder than the day before. Welcome to the frontier. But his tone was almost gentle when he said it. Over the next 2 weeks, the ranch became something it hadn't been in years, occupied. The Henderson children brought noise and chaos. Mary helped with cooking and mending. Thomas worked alongside Rowan on repairs, 2 men moving in quiet synchronization born of shared exhaustion. And Evelyn found herself settling into a rhythm she'd never expected. She woke before dawn and started coffee, fed the chickens, helped Mary with breakfast, rode out with Rowan to check fences, practiced shooting until her aim improved from terrible to merely poor, spent evenings teaching the Henderson children their letters while Mary darned socks and Thomas whittled. It felt almost like a community. But the shadow of Silas Granger hung over everything. Riders appeared on the ridges now. They never came close, just watched from a distance before disappearing. Cattle went missing. A section of fence that had been fine in the morning would be cut by evening. He's trying to bleed us, Rowan said one night. Make us desperate enough to accept whatever offer he makes. Will it work? Thomas asked. Not if I can help it. But Evelyn saw the worry in his eyes. They were running out of time and money. The bank's deadline crept closer, and Granger's pressure kept building. Then one morning, everything changed. Evelyn was drawing water from the creek when she saw them, 5 riders coming hard from the south. She recognized one of them immediately, Silas Granger. She dropped the bucket and ran for the cabin. "Rowan!" He was outside in seconds, rifle in hand. Thomas appeared from the barn. Mary pulled the children inside. The riders pulled up at the edge of the property. Granger sat in the middle, dressed in black as always, looking like death had taken human form. "Morning, folks," he called out pleasantly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "State your business," Rowan said. "Just being neighborly. Wanted to check on the Henderson family. Heard about their terrible fire." His eyes found Thomas. Such a tragedy. Losing everything like that. "We're fine," Thomas said, voice tight. "Are you? Because I can't help but notice you're squatting on cross property now. That's an interesting development." "They're my guests," Rowan said. "Your guests? On a ranch you don't technically own yet. That's going to be the bank's property in about 2 weeks, Rowan. You really think they're going to honor your hospitality arrangements? What do you want, Granger?" The smile never left Granger's face, but his eyes went cold. "I want what I've always wanted, this property, and the Henderson property, and every other piece of land in this valley that stubborn fools think they can hold on to." He leaned forward in his saddle. "But I'm a reasonable man, so I'm going to make you one final offer. Sell me the Cross Ranch for 10 cents on the dollar. Walk away. Start over somewhere else. And I'll let the Hendersons keep their property. Hell, I'll even help them rebuild their barn. And if we refuse?" Evelyn heard herself ask. Granger's attention shifted to her. "Well now, the little bride speaks. Tell me, Miss Mercer, how are you enjoying frontier life? Is it everything you imagined?" "I asked you a question." "So you did." Granger's smile widened. "If you refuse, then I suppose accidents will keep happening. Fires, missing livestock. Maybe worse. The frontier's a dangerous place for people without protection." "That sounds like a threat," Rowan said quietly. "That sounds like concern for your well-being. Big difference." Rowan's hand tightened on the rifle. Evelyn could see the calculation in his eyes, the distance between them and Granger's men, the odds of a fight, the cost of violence. "I'll give you 3 days to think it over," Granger said before Rowan could respond. "After that, my generosity expires." He tipped his hat. "Good day, folks. Enjoy what's left of your little homestead." They rode away at a leisurely pace, confident and unhurried. Nobody moved until they disappeared over the ridge. "He's not bluffing," Thomas said quietly, "about worse things happening. I've heard stories about people who crossed him, families that disappeared, houses that burned with people inside." "Then maybe you should take his offer," Rowan said. "Get your family out while you still can." "What about you?" Rowan didn't answer. Evelyn looked at him. "You're not seriously considering selling." "I'm considering keeping everyone alive." "By giving Granger exactly what he wants?" "By being practical. We're out of money, out of time, and out of options. Fighting Granger doesn't change any of that." "So we just surrender?" "We survive." Rowan's voice was hard. "That's what the frontier teaches you. Survival trumps pride. And what does it teach you about right and wrong? That they're luxuries people can't afford." Evelyn felt something crack open inside her chest. "I don't believe that. And I don't think you do either. Believe what you want. It doesn't change reality." He walked away before she could respond. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in the darkness listening to the wind and thinking about Granger's ultimatum. 3 days. Then what? Violence? More fires? How far would Granger go to get what he wanted? And how far would they go to stop him? She got up and walked outside. The yard was silver with moonlight. Rowan sat on the porch cleaning his rifle. "Can't sleep either?" he asked without looking up. "No?" "Smart. Sleep's for people with less to worry about." Evelyn sat down beside him. "Are you really going to sell?" "I don't know." He ran the cloth along the rifle barrel. "Part of me wants to fight, but the smart part knows fighting's how you end up dead. And if we don't fight, if we just let him win, then we live. We start over somewhere else. Maybe that's not heroic, but it's honest."
You didn't come back here to start over somewhere else. You came back because you owed your brother something. Rowan's hands stilled. My brother's dead. Owing him doesn't matter anymore. It matters to you. Otherwise, you would have left weeks ago. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. Gideon believed in this place, believed it could be something. He died trying to prove it, and I spent 8 years running away from that, telling myself I didn't care. He set down the rifle. But I did care. Still do. Which is probably why I should sell, because caring about things is what gets you killed out here. Or maybe it's what keeps you alive. Really alive, not just surviving. Rowan looked at her. You sound like Gideon. He used to say stuff like that. Made me want to punch him and hug him at the same time. What would he do if he were here? Fight. Definitely fight. Gideon never backed down from anything, even when he should have. Then maybe we should honor that. By getting ourselves killed? By not giving up without trying. Rowan shook his head, but there was no real disagreement in it. 3 days ago, I was ready to walk away from all of this. Now you've got me considering going to war with the most dangerous man in the territory. How the hell did that happen? I'm very persuasive. He almost laughed. You're very something. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead. If we do this, Rowan said finally, if we refuse Granger and fight, it's going to get ugly. People are going to get hurt, maybe killed. You understand that? I understand. And you're still willing to risk it? Evelyn thought about Pittsburgh, about the factory and the boarding house, and the future that was really just slow death with a paycheck. Then she thought about the ranch, broken and struggling and barely holding together, but hers in a way nothing had ever been before. I spent my whole life being practical, she said, playing it safe, doing what made sense, and it got me nowhere. Maybe it's time to try something different. Something reckless. Something worth fighting for. Rowan studied her in the moonlight. You really mean that? Every word. He picked up the rifle again, but his movements were slower now, thoughtful. 3 days. That's not much time to prepare. Prepare for what? For whatever comes after we tell Granger to go to hell. And there it was. The decision made, the line crossed. Evelyn felt her heart start to race, but it wasn't fear exactly. It was something sharper, something that tasted like possibility. So we're doing this? She asked. Apparently we're doing this. Rowan stood up. Which means tomorrow we start getting ready. We'll need to bring all the livestock closer to the cabin, set up night watches, maybe see if any of the other ranchers are willing to stand with us. You think they will? No. But it's worth asking. He started toward the barn, then stopped and looked back at her. Evelyn? Yes? Thank you. For what? For being stupid enough to believe this might work. She smiled. You're welcome. The next morning, Rowan and Thomas rode out to visit the neighboring ranches while Evelyn and Mary fortified the cabin. They moved supplies inside, boarded up one of the windows, prepared extra ammunition. The children didn't understand what was happening, but they sensed the tension. They played quietly, watching the adults with wide eyes. By evening, Rowan and Thomas returned with bad news. Nobody'll help, Thomas reported. They're all too scared of Granger. Can't blame them, Rowan said. Man's got most of the territory under his thumb. So we're alone, Evelyn said. We're alone. Mary looked at her husband. Maybe we should reconsider. Think about the children. I'm thinking about them, Thomas said quietly. What kind of world are we leaving them if men like Granger can just take whatever they want? A world where they're alive. A world where they're slaves, just better dressed ones. The argument continued, but Evelyn stopped listening. She was thinking about Granger's ultimatum. 3 days. 2 days now. Then what? She had a feeling they were about to find out. The answer came the next night. Evelyn woke to the sound of horses and shouting. She grabbed the rifle and ran outside to find the yard lit by torches. 10 riders surrounded the property, and at their center sat Silas Granger. Time's up, Rowan, he called out. What's your answer? Rowan stood on the porch, rifle raised. My answer is the same as yesterday. Get off my property. See, that's where you're wrong. This isn't your property anymore. The bank foreclosed this afternoon, which means, legally speaking, I just bought this land out from under you.
Granger held up a document. Got the papers right here, signed and notarized. So now you're the ones trespassing. That's not possible. We had 2 weeks. You had 2 weeks before the bank was supposed to foreclose. I made them a better offer. They accepted early. Granger's smile was vicious. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack up whatever you can carry and leave tonight. If you're still here when the sun comes up, my men will remove you by force. Evelyn felt the world tilt. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd risked, gone in a single legal maneuver. You can't do this, she heard herself say. I just did, sweetheart, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Thomas stepped forward. What about our property? You said if Rowan sold, you'd let us keep. I said a lot of things. Doesn't mean I meant them. Granger gathered his reins. You've got until dawn. After that, anyone left becomes a problem. And I solve problems permanently. The riders turned and left, taking their torches with them. Darkness swallowed the ranch. Evelyn stood there, rifle hanging uselessly in her hands, trying to process what had just happened. They'd lost. Just like that. No fight, no last stand, just a piece of paper and Granger's ruthless efficiency. Pack up, Rowan said flatly. We're leaving. Rowan, there's nothing to discuss. He won. Game over. Rowan walked toward the barn without waiting for a response. Evelyn looked at Thomas and Mary, saw her own shock reflected in their faces. What do we do? Mary whispered. Evelyn didn't have an answer. For the first time since arriving in Montana, she genuinely didn't know. But Evelyn didn't start packing. She stood in the yard, staring at the darkness where Granger's riders had disappeared, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in her chest. Around her, Mary was crying quietly. Thomas was trying to comfort his children. Rowan had vanished into the barn like a man who'd finally run out of reasons to stay. And Evelyn realized something. She was done running. She walked to the barn and found Rowan throwing saddlebags onto his horse with sharp, angry movements. Where are you going? She asked. Away, where I should have gone weeks ago. Just like that? You're leaving? What the hell else is there to do, Evelyn? He beat us, legally. We can't fight a piece of paper. We can try. Rowan spun around. Try what? You want to march into town and ask the bank to reverse a legal sale? You want to challenge Granger in court when he probably owns the judge? What exactly do you think trying looks like? I don't know yet, but I know giving up isn't the answer. It's not giving up. It's accepting reality. He went back to packing. I never should have stayed. Should have taken the first offer Granger made and disappeared. At least then you wouldn't have... He stopped himself. Wouldn't have what? Wouldn't have gotten your hopes up about a place that was already lost. Evelyn stepped closer. Is that what you think? That I'm upset about the ranch? Aren't you? Of course I am, but I'm more upset about you, about watching you finally start believing in something again, just to have it ripped away. Rowan's hands stilled on the saddle. Don't do that. Do what? Act like you know me, like you understand what I'm feeling. Then tell me what you're feeling. I'm feeling like I was an idiot for thinking anything could be different, for thinking I could come back here and fix what I broke, for thinking maybe, just maybe, I could have something that didn't fall apart the second I touched it. His voice went rough. I'm feeling exactly like I knew I'd feel, which is why I shouldn't have stayed in the first place. But you did stay. Biggest mistake I ever made. The words hit like a slap. Evelyn felt her throat tighten, but she refused to look away. You don't mean that. Don't I? No, because if you did, you wouldn't be this angry. You'd just be relieved. She moved closer still. You're angry because you care. Because for the first time in years, you let yourself want something, and now someone's trying to take it away. Someone succeeded in taking it away. That's the difference. Only if we let them. Rowan laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. How? How exactly do we stop a legal foreclosure backed by the most powerful man in the territory? I don't know, but I know the Rowan Cross who taught me to shoot wouldn't give up without at least trying to figure it out. That Rowan Cross was being stupid. This one learned his lesson. Then I'll be stupid enough for both of us. She turned and walked out of the barn before he could respond. The cabin was chaos. Mary was packing their few belongings while the children clung to her skirts. Thomas sat at the table with his head in his hands. Everyone looked defeated. Evelyn stood in the doorway and made a decision that was probably insane. "We're not leaving," she said. Everyone stopped and looked at her. "What?" Mary said. "We're not leaving. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until we've tried everything we can think of to fight this." Thomas raised his head. "Evelyn, Granger has a legal deed. What can we possibly... I don't know yet. But I know running away guarantees we lose. Staying at least gives us a chance. A chance to get killed, maybe." He said anyone here at dawn would be removed by force. "That means guns, Evelyn. Violence. My children are here." "I know, and if you want to leave, I understand. Take your family somewhere safe, but I'm staying." "You can't stay here alone," Mary said. "That's suicide." "Then it's suicide. But it's my choice." Evelyn looked at each of them in turn. "I came west with nothing. No money, no prospects, no future. Just a letter from a dead man and enough desperation to take a chance on something I couldn't see. And you know what I found? A place worth fighting for. People worth fighting for. For the first time in my life, I have something that feels like it might be mine. And I'm not walking away from it just because a man in a black coat says I have to." "That's very noble," Thomas said quietly. "But nobility doesn't stop bullets." "No, but sometimes it inspires other people to stand with you." Footsteps sounded behind her. Evelyn turned to find Rowan standing in the doorway. "You're serious," he said. "You're actually planning to stay here and face down Granger's men at dawn." "I am." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "Probably. You'll die." "Maybe." Rowan stared at her like he was seeing someone completely different from the woman who'd stepped off the train weeks ago. "Why? Why are you willing to die for a piece of land you don't even legally own?" "Because it stopped being about the land the moment I realized what I was really fighting for." "And what's that?" "The right to choose my own life instead of having it chosen for me." The words hung in the air between them. Rowan's expression shifted, not softening exactly, but something close to it. He looked at Thomas and Mary. "Get the children into the root cellar. It's underground and defensible. If shooting starts, you stay there no matter what you hear." Thomas stood up slowly. "You're staying too?" "Apparently I'm as stupid as she is." "Rowan, you don't have to..." "Yes, I do, because she's right. Running away guarantees we lose. Fighting at least gives us a chance." He looked at Evelyn. "Even if it's a terrible chance." "The worst," Evelyn agreed. "Glad we're on the same page." Mary looked between them, something like understanding dawning on her face. "You're both insane." "Completely," Evelyn said. "But we're insane together, which makes it slightly less insane." "That's not how insanity works." But Mary was almost smiling when she said it. They spent the next few hours preparing. Thomas helped Rowan barricade the windows and set up firing positions. Mary and Evelyn moved all the ammunition into the cabin and filled every container they could find with water in case the well got cut off. The children were settled in the root cellar with blankets and a lamp and strict instructions not to come out for any reason. As dawn approached, the 4 adults gathered in the cabin with rifles loaded and nerves stretched tight. "What's the plan?" Thomas asked. "Don't die," Rowan said. "That's not much of a plan." "It's the best one I've got." Evelyn checked her rifle for the 10th time. Her hands were steady, which surprised her. She'd expected to be terrified, but instead she felt strangely calm, like she'd finally stopped fighting against the current and decided to see where it carried her. "When they come," Rowan said, "let me do the talking. Granger might be willing to negotiate if we..." He won't," Evelyn interrupted. "Men like Granger don't negotiate, they take." "Then what do you suggest?" "We make taking more expensive than he's willing to pay." Rowan looked at her for a long moment. "You've changed since you got here." "So have you." "Not for the better, I'd wager." "I disagree." Before Rowan could respond, Mary called from the window. "Someone's coming!" They all moved to look. A single rider was approaching from the east, coming fast. Not Granger's men, someone else. The rider pulled up at the edge of the yard and dismounted. It was the marshal from town, the same one who'd told Evelyn about Gideon's death. Rowan opened the door. "Marshal Davies, you're up early?" "Heard about what happened with the bank. Came to make sure nobody does anything stupid." "Little late for that," Rowan said. "We're way past stupid into suicidal." Davies looked past him into the cabin, took in the barricaded windows and loaded rifles. "Jesus, Rowan, you're really planning to fight Granger?" We're planning to not leave our home. This isn't your home anymore. Legally speaking, I know what legally speaking means, Marshall. I also know what morally speaking means. And morally, Granger stealing this land through legal tricks is no different than stealing it with a gun. Maybe so, but the law doesn't recognize moral ownership, it recognizes paper. And Granger's got the paper. Then the law's wrong. Davies sighed. Look, I understand you're angry. I understand this feels unjust. But if you resist when Granger's men come to take possession, I'll have to arrest you. Or worse, stand by while they shoot you. Is that what you want? What I want, Rowan said slowly, is for you to tell me the law in this territory isn't just whatever Silas Granger says it is. I wish I could, but you can't. No, I can't. Davies looked genuinely pained. I'm sorry, Rowan. I truly am. Your brother was a good man, and you, well, you're trying to be, but taking on Granger like this is just going to get you killed. Then I'll die standing up instead of crawling away. That's noble. It's also pointless. Evelyn stepped forward. Marshall, can I ask you something? Davies turned to her. Ma'am, how many other families has Granger done this to? Forced off their land through legal manipulation and threats? The marshal's jaw tightened. More than I can count. And how many times have you stopped him? I can't stop a legal transaction. That's not what I asked. I asked how many times you've tried. Davies didn't answer. That's what I thought, Evelyn said. You know what he's doing is wrong. You know he's destroying families and stealing land through fear and corruption. But you won't stand against him because it's not worth the risk. Well, maybe it's time someone decided it was worth the risk. Someone already did, Davies said quietly. Man named Patterson. Owned a ranch about 15 miles north. Refused to sell to Granger 2 years ago. Him and his whole family died in a house fire 3 weeks later. Funny thing about that fire, it started in 3 different places at once. The implication hung heavy in the air. So that's your advice? Rowan said. Give up before we end up like Patterson? My advice is to leave while you still can. Take whatever you can carry and start over somewhere Granger's reach doesn't extend. And if there is no such place, Davies looked at him sadly. Then I guess you're out of options. He climbed back on his horse. I'll give you until noon. After that, I can't protect you from what's coming. We're not asking you to protect us, Evelyn said. We're asking you to do what's right. Sometimes what's right and what's possible aren't the same thing, ma'am. Davies rode away, leaving them standing in the early morning light. Well, Thomas said after a moment, that was encouraging. At least we know where he stands, Rowan said, which is nowhere. Mary was looking at Evelyn with an odd expression. You really think we can win this? I think we can try. That's more than most people get. The sun climbed higher. Noon approached. They waited. And then the riders came. Not Granger's usual crew. More. At least 20 men, all armed, spreading out to surround the property. They didn't rush or threaten. They just took positions and waited. Then Silas Granger himself rode through the middle, flanked by 2 particularly rough-looking men who had the air of professional killers. Rowan Cross, Granger called. I'm surprised you're still here. Thought you'd have shown some sense by now. Rowan stepped onto the porch, rifle held loosely. Sense is overrated. So is bravery when it's really just stupidity in a fancy coat. Granger gestured at the cabin. You've got people in there. A woman. Probably the Henderson family, too. Unless they were smart enough to leave. You really want to risk their lives over a property you can't keep? What I want is for you to get off my land. Not your land. We've established this. I have the deed. Banks approved the transfer. This property belongs to me now, which means you're trespassing. Then I'm trespassing. Arrest me. Granger smiled. I'd rather not. Arrests are messy. Require witnesses and paperwork. I prefer simpler solutions. Like burning down houses with families inside? The smile never wavered. I don't know what you're talking about. Patterson, 2 years ago, him and his wife and kids all died in a fire that started in 3 places at once. Tragic accident. But accidents happen, especially to people who make poor decisions. Evelyn appeared in the doorway beside Rowan. Granger's attention shifted to her immediately. Miss Mercer. Still here, I see. I had higher hopes for your intelligence. Disappointed you often, I imagine. Granger actually laughed. She's got fire. I like that. Tell you what, Miss Mercer, I'm a reasonable man. I'll make you a personal offer. Come work for me. I need someone with your spirit running one of my operations. Good pay. Better than you'd make breaking your back on this dead ranch.
I'd rather eat glass.
That can be arranged too. The air went cold. Rowan's hand tightened on his rifle. You've made your threats, Granger. We're not leaving, so either arrest us or ride away. Those are your options. You're forgetting a third option, which is, I have my men drag you out and burn this place to the ground. See how brave you feel then. Try it. See what happens. For a long moment, Granger studied Rowan's face. Then he looked at his men and nodded. What happened next happened fast. 4 of Granger's men dismounted and started toward the cabin. Rowan raised his rifle. Stop right there. They kept coming. I said stop. One of them reached for his gun. Rowan fired. The shot hit the ground 2 feet in front of the man, kicking up dust. The men stopped, hands moving to their weapons. Next one goes higher, Rowan said. Granger held up a hand, stopping his men from drawing. That was a mistake, Rowan. Was it? Because from where I'm standing, you're the one who sent armed men to drag civilians off property without legal cause. I have every legal cause. The deed was obtained through fraud and intimidation. I'm guessing if someone looked close enough at your paperwork, they'd find all sorts of irregularities. And who's going to look? The marshal won't, the judge won't. Nobody in this territory has the spine to stand against me. Then I guess I'm nobody. Evelyn felt her heart hammering. This was it. The moment where everything either changed or ended. Then someone shouted from the ridge. Everyone turned. More riders were coming, at least a dozen of them, moving fast. For a terrible moment, Evelyn thought it was reinforcements for Granger. Then she recognized the lead rider. It was the bartender from the Silver Bell, and behind her came the man who ran the general store, and the blacksmith, and the woman who owned the boarding house, and ranchers from neighboring properties, and townspeople Evelyn had never even met. They rode down into the valley and formed a loose line between Granger's men and the cabin. The bartender, her name was Sarah, Evelyn remembered, looked at Granger with unconcealed contempt. Seems like you've got a problem, Silas. Stay out of this, Sarah. It's not your concern. The hell it's not. You've been squeezing this territory dry for years, taking property from people who can't fight back. We're tired of it. You don't have any authority here. Neither do you. You've got money and guns and fear. But today we've got numbers. Granger looked at the assembled townspeople, his expression darkening. You're making a serious mistake. Probably, but we're making it together, which makes it less of a mistake and more of a statement. A statement that we're done being afraid of you. For the first time, Granger looked uncertain. He glanced at his men, calculating odds. 20 armed riders against a dozen townspeople. He'd probably win a fight, but it wouldn't be clean. People would die, and survivors would talk. This isn't over, he said finally. Yes, it is, said a new voice. Everyone turned again. The marshal was riding up with another man, older, well-dressed, carrying a leather case. Who the hell are you? Granger demanded. Richard Sutton, Territory Land Office. The man opened his case and pulled out documents. I received some interesting correspondence yesterday from parties concerned about irregularities in recent property transfers. Took the liberty of reviewing your acquisition of the Cross Ranch. He looked at Granger. Turns out the bank didn't have legal authority to sell before the foreclosure date, which means your deed is invalid. Granger's face went still. That's not possible. It's very possible. In fact, it's documented right here. The bank president, who I believe has financial ties to several of your businesses, jumped the gun by 2 weeks. Probably thought nobody would notice or care. Sutton smiled without warmth. But somebody did notice, and I care very much about legal procedure. You can't. I can. And I am. Your deed is void, Mr. Granger. The Cross property remains in its original ownership status until the legitimate foreclosure date, which gives Mr. Cross and Miss Mercer exactly 14 days to settle the debt or find alternative arrangements. Evelyn felt the world tilt again, but in the opposite direction this time. Who sent you that correspondence? Granger's voice was deadly quiet. Anonymous source, but very thorough. Included copies of several questionable property transfers you've made over the past 3 years. I'll be reviewing all of them. Sutton put the documents back in his case. I suggest you retain legal counsel, Mr. Granger. You're going to need it. For a moment, Evelyn thought Granger might actually pull his gun. His hand moved toward it, his face twisted with rage. Then Sarah's voice cut through the tension. I wouldn't. You shoot a land office official with 20 witnesses watching, even you can't buy your way out of that. Granger's hand stopped. He looked at each of them in turn. The land official, the marshal, the townspeople, Rowan and Evelyn standing on the porch. This isn't finished, he said. Actually, Sutton replied, I think it might be, at least for you. Granger wheeled his horse around. Let's go. His men hesitated, clearly confused by the sudden retreat. But after a moment they followed, leaving the property in a cloud of dust and barely contained fury. Silence fell over the valley. Then Sarah started laughing. It was a slightly hysterical sound, but it broke the tension like a hammer through glass. Did we just win? She asked. I think we did, the marshal said, sounding stunned. Evelyn looked at Rowan. He was staring at the departing riders like he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. How? He said. Who sent that correspondence? Sutton smiled. As I said, anonymous source. But between you and me? He lowered his voice. Patterson's widow. She survived the fire but lost everything else. Been collecting evidence against Granger for 2 years, waiting for the right moment to strike. When she heard about your situation, she figured it was time. Where is she now? Safe. Far from Granger's reach, but she wanted you to know, fighting back is how you win. Not always, but sometimes. The land official tipped his hat and rode away with the marshal following. The townspeople stayed, approaching the cabin in a loose group. We should have done this years ago, Sarah said. Stood up to Granger together instead of letting him pick us off one by one. Why didn't you? Evelyn asked. Fear. Same reason nobody does anything. We were afraid of losing what little we had. She looked at Evelyn and Rowan. But watching you two refuse to give up made us realize something. If we don't fight for what's ours, we don't really own it anyway. We didn't do anything special, Rowan said. You stayed. When it would have been easier to leave, you stayed. That's special enough. One by one, the townspeople approached to shake Rowan's hand or nod to Evelyn. The blacksmith offered to help repair their fence. The store owner said supplies would be on credit until they got back on their feet. The bartender invited them to dinner at the Silver Bell, on the house. It was overwhelming. When the last of them had ridden away, Evelyn and Rowan stood alone in the yard. Thomas and Mary emerged from the cabin with the children, who immediately started asking questions about all the excitement. What just happened? Mary asked. I think we just became part of a community, Evelyn said. And we've got 2 weeks to figure out how to pay off a debt we still can't afford, Rowan added, but he was almost smiling when he said it. That night, after the Hendersons had settled in the barn and the children were asleep, Evelyn sat on the porch watching stars emerge. Rowan joined her after a few minutes, carrying 2 cups of terrible coffee. Here, figured you could use it. Thanks. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. I still can't believe it, Rowan said finally, that people actually came, actually stood with us. Why is that so hard to believe? Because in my experience, people look out for themselves. They don't risk everything for strangers. We're not strangers anymore. We're neighbors. Rowan shook his head. A month ago, I was ready to sell this place and disappear. Now I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to save it. How the hell did that happen? You stopped running. Because you wouldn't let me. I gave you a choice. You made it yourself. He looked at her. Did I? Because from where I'm sitting, you basically forced me into caring again. Is that such a bad thing? Ask me in 2 weeks when we still can't pay the debt and lose the place anyway. We'll find a way. You don't know that. No. But I choose to believe it anyway. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. You're the most stubbornly optimistic person I've ever met. I'm not optimistic. I'm determined. There's a difference. What's the difference? Optimism is hoping things work out. Determination is making them work out. He almost smiled. And how do you plan to make 14 days of money appear out of thin air? I don't know yet, but I know giving up guarantees failure. Trying at least gives us a chance. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. Rowan drank his coffee, staring out at the dark valley. My brother would have liked you. The words caught Evelyn off guard. Yeah?
Yeah, you've got his same stubborn belief that things can be better if you just work hard enough. I always thought it was naive. Now I'm starting to think maybe it's just brave. It can be both. True. He turned to look at her. Evelyn, I need to tell you something. What? He seemed to struggle with the words. When you first showed up here, I thought you were going to be a problem, another complication I didn't need. But you, he paused, you changed things. Changed me, maybe. I'm not sure I would have fought for this place if you hadn't been here fighting alongside me. Evelyn's throat tightened. Rowan?
Let me finish. I'm not good with words, so I need to get this out before I lose my nerve. He took a breath. I think what I'm trying to say is thank you for being stubborn enough to stay, for being crazy enough to fight, for making me remember what it feels like to care about something again.
You're welcome, Evelyn said quietly, but I didn't do it for you. I did it for me, because staying here, fighting for this place, it's the first time in my life I felt like I was building something instead of just surviving. Still, I'm glad you stayed. So am I. They sat there in the darkness, not touching, but closer than they'd ever been. Something unspoken hung between them, but neither was quite ready to name it. Finally, Rowan stood. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to save this place.
We? He paused. Yeah, we. If you're still willing to be partners in this disaster. I'm willing. Even though we'll probably fail? Even though? Rowan nodded slowly. Then I guess we're doing this together. I guess we are. He walked toward the barn, then stopped and looked back. Evelyn? Yeah? I'm glad the train was late. If you'd arrived on time, you would have met Gideon. And as much as I wish my brother was still alive, I'm starting to think maybe things worked out the way they were supposed to. Before Evelyn could respond, he disappeared into the darkness. She sat alone on the porch, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. They'd won today. Barely. Miraculously. But they'd won. Granger had been forced to retreat. The townspeople had rallied. The land official had bought them time. But 2 weeks wasn't much, and the debt was still real. Evelyn looked up at the stars and let herself feel the enormity of what lay ahead. They needed money they didn't have. They needed a miracle in a place where miracles were in short supply. But for the first time since arriving in Montana, she wasn't facing it alone. She had Rowan. She had the Hendersons. She had a community that had finally decided to stand together. It might not be enough, but it was something, and right now something felt like everything. The morning after their victory felt like waking up from a dream only to remember the nightmare wasn't over. Evelyn rose before dawn and walked to the barn where Rowan was already working. He had papers spread across a makeshift table, Gideon's old ledgers, bills, receipts. His face was drawn in the lamplight. "How bad is it?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Worse than I thought. Gideon borrowed against everything, the cattle, the land, even the equipment. He was gambling that one good season would turn it all around. And then he died. And then he died." Rowan rubbed his eyes. "We owe the bank $800. We have 14 days to come up with it. Our current assets amount to maybe $50 worth of cattle and some broken equipment." Evelyn pulled up a crate and sat down. "So we need to make $750 in 2 weeks. We need a miracle in 2 weeks. There's a difference. What about selling cattle? We'd need to sell 30 head to make that kind of money. We have 12, and half of them are too scrawny to fetch decent prices. The land? Nobody's buying land right now except Granger, and I'd burn this place to the ground before I'd sell to him." Evelyn studied the numbers, trying to find some angle they'd missed. "What did Gideon do before the debt got this bad? Worked himself to death trying to make the ranch profitable. He had ideas about breeding better stock, improving the grazing land, maybe even starting a small dairy operation, but ideas don't pay bills. What if we finished what he started?" Rowan looked at her. "In 2 weeks? Why not? You said he wanted to improve the stock. What if we took our best cattle to market in Billings? I heard the prices are better there than in Red Hollow. Billings is 4 days away. That's 8 days round trip, which leaves us 6 days to come up with the rest of the money. Better than 0 days." Rowan stared at the ledgers. "Even if we get top dollar for every head we bring, we're still short by at least 300. Then we'll figure out the 300 when we get back. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's possible, and possible beats impossible. He almost smiled. You really don't know how to give up, do you? I learned from the best. This time he did smile, just a little. Fine. We'll take the cattle to Billings. But Evelyn, if this doesn't work, we're out of options. The bank forecloses, Granger probably buys the property for pennies, and we lose everything. Then we better make it work. They spent the next day preparing. Rowan selected the 8 best cattle, while Thomas helped repair the wagon. Mary organized supplies for the journey. The plan was for Rowan and Evelyn to make the trip while Thomas stayed behind to watch the property and protect his family. You sure you don't want me to come instead? Thomas asked. I know cattle. Evelyn knows sewing. Evelyn knows how to fight, Rowan said. And we might need that more than cattle expertise on a 4-day journey through open territory. The night before they left, Evelyn packed her few belongings while Mary watched from the doorway. You're in love with him, Mary said quietly. Evelyn's hands stilled. What? Rowan, you're in love with him. I barely know him. That's not an answer. Evelyn sat down on the bed, suddenly exhausted. I don't know what I feel. A month ago, I was engaged to his dead brother. Now I'm about to ride 4 days into the wilderness with a man who barely talks to me. It's complicated. Love usually is. It's not love. It's partnership. Mutual survival. Mary smiled gently. Keep telling yourself that, but I've seen the way you look at him when he's not watching, and more importantly, I've seen the way he looks at you. He doesn't. He does. He's just too stubborn and damaged to admit it. Mary moved to sit beside her. Evelyn, I've known Rowan Cross for years. Before he left, he was angry all the time, bitter, like the world had hurt him, and he wanted to hurt it back. When he came back for Gideon's funeral, I thought he'd gotten worse. But since you arrived, he's different, softer somehow. Like maybe he remembers what it's like to care about something. That's not because of me, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, you're the only thing that's changed. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that. She looked down at her hands, calloused now, scarred from work, nothing like the factory girl's hands she'd brought from Pittsburgh. I came here for stability, she said quietly. A future I could predict. Instead, I got chaos and uncertainty and a man who might leave the moment things get too hard. Or he might stay. People surprise you sometimes. I can't afford to bet on surprises. Then what can you afford to bet on? Evelyn thought about that. Myself. My own strength. The things I can control. And Rowan? Can you control how you feel about him? I don't feel... She stopped, sighed. I don't know what I feel, and I don't have time to figure it out. Right now I need to focus on saving this ranch. Everything else can wait. Mary squeezed her hand. Just don't wait so long you miss your chance. They left at dawn with 8 cattle, a wagon full of supplies, and 2 rifles. The journey started easy, following familiar trails through grassland that stretched to the horizon. But by the second day, the landscape turned rougher. Rocky terrain gave way to dense forest. The trails grew narrow and treacherous. Rowan rode ahead while Evelyn managed the wagon. They didn't talk much, partly because the work demanded concentration, partly because neither knew what to say. On the 3rd night, they made camp near a stream. Rowan built a fire while Evelyn checked the cattle. When she returned, he'd managed to shoot a rabbit and was roasting it over the flames. Didn't know you could hunt, Evelyn said. There's a lot you don't know about me. True, but I'm learning. He glanced at her. What have you learned? That you're better with actions than words. That you care more than you want anyone to know. That you're terrified of losing people, so you push them away before they can leave. Rowan's jaw tightened. That obvious? Only if you're paying attention. He turned the rabbit, not meeting her eyes. My parents died when I was 16. Sickness took them both within a week. After that, it was just me and Gideon. He was 12, too young to lose everything. But he had you. He had a bitter, angry kid who didn't know how to take care of himself, let alone a brother. Rowan's voice went rough. I tried. I really did. But I was drowning, and every time Gideon needed something, it felt like he was pulling me under. So I got angry at him for needing me, and he got angry at me for resenting him. And eventually we both said things we couldn't take back. What kind of things? I told him he was the reason I couldn't have a life.
that taking care of him was like carrying a stone around my neck. He was quiet for a moment. He told me I should have died instead of our parents because at least they knew how to love people. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. You were both kids. Hurting and scared doesn't make the words hurt less. I left the next day, spent 8 years drifting from town to town, telling myself I was better off alone. Then I got the telegram about Gideon, and suddenly all that time I wasted being angry felt like the stupidest thing I'd ever done. Is that why you came back? I came back because I owed him. Owed him an apology I'd never get to give. Owed him the chance to see the ranch succeed since I wasn't there to help him build it. He finally looked at her. And then you showed up, this stubborn woman who refused to quit even when quitting made sense, and suddenly I couldn't leave. Because for the first time since my parents died, I felt like maybe I belonged somewhere. The confession hung between them, raw and undefended. I'm glad you stayed, Evelyn said softly. Are you? Because I'm not sure I've made your life any better. You gave me a choice. That's better than anything I had in Pittsburgh. A choice to fight a losing battle. Maybe. But it's my battle to fight. That matters. Rowan pulled the rabbit from the fire and divided it between them. They ate in silence, the night sounds filling the space between words. What about you? Rowan asked eventually. What made you answer Gideon's letter? Desperation, mostly, and maybe a little bit of hope that somewhere in the world there was a place I could matter. You mattered in Pittsburgh. No, I existed in Pittsburgh. There's a difference. She picked at the rabbit meat. I worked 14 hours a day making clothes for people I'd never meet. Lived in a room with 3 other girls who barely spoke to me. Spent my one day off sleeping because I was too tired to do anything else. That's not mattering. That's just surviving until you don't. So you came west looking for what? Purpose? I came west looking for anything that wasn't that. Gideon's letter promised honest work and fair partnership. It didn't promise love or happiness or any of the things mail-order bride stories usually promise. Just work and partnership. And that sounded like enough. Is it? Enough? Evelyn considered the question. A month ago, I would have said yes. Now I'm not sure. What changed? I did. This place changed me. You changed me. She met his eyes. I came here expecting to survive. Instead, I'm learning how to live. Turns out they're completely different things. Rowan looked at her like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. You know what scares me most? What? That I'm starting to need this. The ranch. This fight. You. His voice dropped. And needing things is how you lose them. Or it's how you keep them. You can't hold on to something you're not willing to need. That's not how loss works. Loss doesn't care if you need something. It takes it anyway. Maybe. But at least you had it for a while. That's better than never having it at all. Rowan shook his head. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of trying? They finished eating and settled in for the night. Rowan took first watch while Evelyn lay down near the fire. She expected to stay awake, her mind racing with worries about the debt and the ranch and everything that could go wrong. Instead, she fell asleep listening to the sound of Rowan moving around the camp, and for the first time in weeks she felt something close to safe. They reached Billings on the 4th day, exhausted and covered in trail dust. The town was bigger than Red Hollow, real streets, brick buildings, a proper market square where cattle buyers gathered. Rowan negotiated with 3 different buyers while Evelyn watched. He was good at it, she noticed. Firm, but not desperate, willing to walk away if the price wasn't right. By late afternoon, they'd sold all 8 head for better prices than Evelyn had dared hope. When the last buyer handed over payment, Rowan counted it twice before looking at her. $420. Evelyn's heart sank. We need 800. I know. So we're still almost 400 short. I know that too. They stood in the market square while the sun sank toward the mountains, both of them trying to figure out what came next. We could try to find work here, Evelyn suggested. Make some money before heading back. In a week? We'd be lucky to make $50, and that's if we can find work at all. Then what? Rowan didn't answer. His attention had caught on something across the square, a poster nailed to a wall. He walked over to read it, and Evelyn followed. The poster advertised a horse race. 3 days from now. First prize, $500. No, Evelyn said immediately. It's our best option. You don't even have the horse fast enough to compete. We could buy one. These cattle sales gave us money to work with. And if you lose, then we're in exactly the same position we're in now, broke and desperate. Except we'll have wasted $400 on a horse you can't keep. Rowan turned to face her. You got a better idea? Evelyn wanted to argue, but she didn't have a better idea. They needed money fast, and a horse race was the only way to get it. This is insane, she said. Probably, but we're way past sane. They found a horse trader at the edge of town, a grizzled man with sharp eyes who looked them over and immediately quoted inflated prices. I need a fast horse, Rowan said. Race quality. The trader laughed. Race quality costs more than you've got, son. Try me. They spent 2 hours looking at horses. Most were overpriced or too old or not fast enough. Evelyn was ready to give up when she noticed a mare in the back corral, tall, lean, with intelligent eyes. What about that one? She asked. The trader followed her gaze and frowned. That's Tempest. She's fast as hell but mean as a snake. Through her last 3 riders. Why keep her? Because when she's in the mood, she can outrun anything in the territory. Problem is getting her in the mood. Rowan walked to the corral and studied the horse. Tempest watched him back, ears flat, clearly not interested in being friendly. How much? Rowan asked. You can't handle her. How much? The trader quoted a price that made Evelyn wince. It was most of their cattle money. If Rowan bought this horse and lost the race, they'd be finished. I'll take her, Rowan said. You're making a mistake. Won't be my first. They led Tempest back to their camp outside town. The mare fought every step, pulling against the lead rope and trying to bite anyone who got close. This was a terrible idea, Evelyn said, as Tempest nearly kicked Rowan in the chest. Probably. She's going to kill you before you even get to the race. Maybe. You're impossible. So are you. We're perfect for each other. The words came out casual, almost joking, but they hung in the air with unexpected weight. Evelyn looked at Rowan. He was watching Tempest, apparently oblivious to what he'd just said. Or maybe not oblivious, maybe just afraid to acknowledge it. Over the next 2 days, Rowan worked with Tempest. Evelyn watched him gentle the horse through patience and persistence, never forcing, never punishing. Just steady, consistent presence until Tempest slowly began to trust him. You're good at this, Evelyn said on the second evening. At what? Getting angry, damage things to trust you. Rowan looked at her sharply. We talking about the horse? Maybe. He was quiet for a long moment. I'm not good at it. I just understand what it's like to be angry and damaged. Makes it easier to be patient. Is that what you are? Patient? With horses, yeah. With people? He shook his head. I'm still learning. The day of the race arrived hot and cloudless. The whole town turned out to watch. 15 horses lined up at the starting point, and Rowan was nearly thrown before the race even started when Tempest decided she didn't like the horse next to her. Evelyn stood in the crowd, heart hammering, watching Rowan struggle to control the mare. He's going to lose, someone said nearby. That horse is wild. She'll throw him first turn. Evelyn wanted to defend Rowan, to tell them they were wrong, but she couldn't, because they might be right. The starting gun fired. 15 horses exploded forward in a chaos of dust and thunder. Tempest burst from the pack like she'd been shot from a cannon, running so fast Evelyn lost sight of her in the crowd. The race looped through town, out into open country, and back. 3 miles total. Evelyn couldn't see most of it, just caught glimpses as horses passed certain points. Tempest was in front. Then she wasn't. Then she was again. The crowd roared as the horses came back into sight for the final stretch. 3 horses ran neck and neck, a black stallion, a gray gelding, and Tempest. Rowan leaned low over Tempest's neck, moving with her instead of against her. Evelyn saw the moment he stopped trying to control the horse and just let her run. Tempest pulled ahead. 10 yards from the finish, 5 yards. She crossed first by half a length. The crowd exploded. Evelyn couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only watch as Rowan brought Tempest around, the mare dancing and tossing her head like she knew exactly what she'd accomplished. When Rowan dismounted, Evelyn was there before he could get his feet under him. You won, she said stupidly. I won. He was grinning, actually grinning, and Evelyn realized she'd never seen him look happy before. It transformed his entire face. You actually won. Tempest won. I just didn't fall off.
The race official approached with an envelope. First prize, $500. Congratulations, Mr. Cross. Rowan took the envelope with shaking hands. He opened it, counted the money, then looked at Evelyn. We did it. We did it. They had the money. They could save the ranch. Evelyn felt tears burning behind her eyes and blinked them back. We should head back. We've only got a few days left to... Rowan pulled her into a hug. It was sudden and unexpected and awkward because neither of them really knew how to do this. But his arms were solid around her and she could feel his heart racing, and for just a moment everything else fell away. Thank you, he said quietly, for making me believe this was possible. You made it possible. You're the one who rode that crazy horse. But I wouldn't have tried if you hadn't been here pushing me to try. They stayed like that for a heartbeat longer than necessary, then stepped apart awkwardly. We should get supplies for the trip back, Evelyn said, her voice not quite steady. Yeah, supplies. Good idea. They bought what they needed and left Billings at dawn the next morning. The journey back felt faster somehow, like the land itself was pulling them home. They were 2 days from the ranch when they saw the smoke. It rose black and thick against the sky, coming from the direction of the Cross property. No, Rowan breathed. He kicked his horse into a gallop. Evelyn followed, her heart in her throat, Tempest running behind them on a lead rope. They crested the final ridge and saw the devastation. The barn was burning. The cabin was on fire. And scattered across the yard were bodies. Rowan was off his horse before it fully stopped, running toward the cabin. Evelyn followed, screaming for the Hendersons. Mary! Thomas! No answer. Rowan kicked in the cabin door. Smoke poured out. He went in anyway. Evelyn ran to the barn. The fire was too hot to get close, but she could hear animals screaming inside. Then she saw them. Thomas was lying near the well, blood spreading beneath him. Mary was crumpled by the corral, the children clutched in her arms. Evelyn dropped to her knees beside them. Mary, can you hear me? Mary's eyes fluttered open. Evelyn? I'm here. What happened? Granger. He came with his men. Thomas tried to stop them. They shot him. I tried to run with the children, but she coughed, and blood appeared at the corner of her mouth. Don't talk. I'll get help. No time. The children... Mary's grip on her kids loosened. Keep them safe. Mary... But Mary's eyes had closed. Evelyn felt for a pulse and found nothing. She turned to the children. The girl was unconscious but breathing. The boy stared up at her with terrified eyes. Are you hurt? Evelyn asked. He shook his head. Rowan emerged from the burning cabin carrying something wrapped in blankets. He was coughing, his face black with soot. Anyone inside? Evelyn called. No, but everything's gone. The money, the supplies, everything. He saw Thomas and Mary then. Saw the children. The envelope with the race winnings was still in his coat. He pulled it out and opened it. Empty. Granger had found it and taken it. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd risked, gone in one afternoon of violence. Rowan stood there holding the empty envelope, his expression absolutely blank. Rowan, Evelyn said. He didn't respond. Rowan, we have to get the children somewhere safe. We have to... I'm going to kill him. The words were quiet, flat, absolutely certain. Rowan, I'm going to kill Silas Granger and anyone who stands with him. He walked to his horse and mounted up. Where are you going? To finish this. You can't just watch me. Evelyn grabbed his horse's bridle. If you go after him now, you'll die. You'll ride straight to his property and get shot before you even see his face. Is that what you want? What I want is for that bastard to pay for what he's done. Then be smart about it. Don't throw your life away on revenge. Why not? What else have I got? The question hit her like a physical blow. You have me, she said. Rowan looked down at her. For the first time since seeing the bodies, something human showed in his eyes. Evelyn, you have me. And those children over there who just lost both their parents. And a town that finally stood up to Granger because we showed them it was possible. You throw your life away now. You're throwing all of that away too. He killed them, Mary and Thomas. He burned everything. I know. And he'll answer for it, but not like this. Rowan's hands shook on the reins. Then how? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. Together. For a long moment she thought he'd ride away anyway. that rage would win over reason. Then he dismounted slowly, his legs almost giving out. Evelyn caught him. "I've got you." They were good people. They didn't deserve this. No, they didn't. This is my fault. I should have known Granger would do something. Should have been here to... Stop. This isn't your fault. This is Granger's fault, and he's going to answer for it. Rowan looked at the burning buildings, at the bodies, at the destruction of everything he'd tried to save. How do we come back from this? The same way we've come back from everything else, one step at a time. But even as she said it, Evelyn wondered if she was right. They'd lost the money, lost their friends, lost the ranch itself, which would foreclose in days without payment. For the first time since arriving in Montana, Evelyn felt genuine despair settling over her. Maybe some things really were too broken to fix. They buried Mary and Thomas on the ridge behind what was left of the barn, next to Gideon's grave. The children stood between Rowan and Evelyn, silent and hollow-eyed. The boy, his name was Daniel, held his sister Sarah's hand so tight his knuckles were white. Marshal Davies came out to investigate, took statements, looked at the bodies and the burned buildings with an expression that said he already knew who was responsible and already knew nothing would be done about it. "I'll file a report," he said, which was lawman speak for "this goes nowhere." "That's it?" Rowan's voice was dangerously quiet. "2 people murdered, a ranch burned, children orphaned, and all you're going to do is file a report? What do you want me to do, Rowan? Ride up to Granger's property and arrest him? On what evidence? You got witnesses who'll testify they saw him here?" "Everybody knows it was him." "Knowing and proving are different things." "So he gets away with murder." Davies looked genuinely pained. "I'm sorry. I truly am. But unless you've got proof, forget it." Rowan turned away. "Just go." After the marshal left, Evelyn found Rowan sitting on the porch steps of the destroyed cabin, staring at nothing. "We need to talk about the children," she said. "What about them?" "They can't stay here. There's nowhere for them to stay. And we can't take care of them when we're about to lose the property anyway." "So what do you suggest?" "Thomas had a brother in Oregon. We should contact him, see if he can take them." Rowan nodded slowly. "That makes sense. It'll take time to arrange. In the meantime, Mrs. Chen at the boarding house said she'd watch them." "Fine." Evelyn sat down beside him. "Talk to me." "About what?" "About what you're feeling, because bottling it up isn't helping. What I'm feeling is that I want to burn Granger's house down with him inside it. But since you've made it clear that's not acceptable, I'm trying to figure out what is." "Justice. Legal justice." "There is no legal justice. You heard the marshal. Granger's untouchable." "Then we make him touchable." Rowan looked at her. "How?" "I don't know yet, but I know giving up isn't the answer. We lost the money, Evelyn. The bank forecloses in 3 days. Even if we somehow proved Granger murdered the Hendersons, it doesn't change the fact that we're finished. Not if we fight back. With what? Hope? Stubbornness? Those things don't pay debts." Evelyn stood up abruptly. "Fine. Give up. Crawl away. Let Granger win. Let Mary and Thomas die for nothing. I'm sure that'll make you feel better." "That's not fair. None of this is fair, but we're still here, which means we can still fight." "Fight with what?" Evelyn didn't have an answer. She walked away before Rowan could see the tears she'd been holding back since they'd found the bodies. She made it to the creek before she broke down completely. All the grief and rage and fear she'd been suppressing came out in ugly, choking sobs. She cried for Mary and Thomas, for their children, for the ranch they'd fought so hard to save, for Rowan, who'd finally started to hope again only to have it ripped away. And she cried for herself. For the foolish woman who thought she could build something permanent in a world designed to tear everything down. She didn't hear Rowan approach until he was sitting beside her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what?" "For being angry at you when you're just trying to help." "I don't know how to help. I keep saying we'll fight, but I don't know what that looks like anymore." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the water. "My mother used to say something," Rowan said eventually. "When things got bad, when we couldn't see a way forward, she'd say, the only way out is through." "Through what?" "The hard part. The impossible part. The part that makes you want to quit." He picked up a stone and tossed it into the creek. "I never understood what she meant. Always seemed like empty comfort. But lately I've been thinking maybe she was right. Maybe the only way to get past something is to go straight through it, no matter how much it hurts. And what does going through it look like for us?
I don't know, but I know running from it doesn't work. I tried that for 8 years and it didn't solve anything. Evelyn wiped her eyes. So we stay. Even though we're going to lose the ranch, even though Granger might come back and finish what he started, we stay, and we find a way to make him answer for what he's done. The marshal won't help us. Then we find someone who will.
They walked back to the property to find Sarah, the bartender from the Silver Bell, waiting with a wagon full of supplies. "Heard what happened," she said. "Brought some things, food, blankets, lumber. Town's taking up a collection to help rebuild." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "You don't have to—" "Yes, we do. Granger's gotten away with this kind of thing for too long. It's time somebody stood up to him properly." Other wagons arrived throughout the day. The blacksmith brought tools. The store owner brought nails and canvas for temporary shelter. Ranchers from neighboring properties came to help clear debris and start repairs. By nightfall, they'd erected a canvas shelter big enough to sleep in and cleared enough space to start thinking about rebuilding. Rowan stood watching the activity with an expression Evelyn couldn't read. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I spent 8 years convinced nobody gave a damn about anyone but themselves. Turns out I was wrong. People care. They're just scared to show it sometimes. Granger made them scared. We made them brave." Rowan looked at her. "You did. I was ready to run. You're the one who stayed." "We both stayed. That's what matters." That night, after everyone had left and the children were asleep in the canvas shelter, Evelyn and Rowan sat by the fire. "I've been thinking," Rowan said, "about how to get to Granger." "I'm listening." "The marshal won't touch him. The judge is probably in his pocket, but there's one person who might be able to help. Richard Sutton, the land office official. He's already investigating Granger's property deals." "You think he'd investigate a murder?" "Not his jurisdiction, but if we could prove Granger's been using violence and intimidation as part of his land acquisition strategy, that might be enough to bring in federal authorities." "How do we prove it?" "Patterson's widow. She's been collecting evidence for 2 years. If we could find her, get her to share what she knows, maybe we could build a case strong enough that even Granger can't buy his way out." Evelyn felt a spark of hope. "Where is she?" "I don't know, but Sutton might." They rode to the land office in town the next morning. Sutton was there, surrounded by paperwork, looking tired and frustrated. "Mr. Cross, Miss Mercer, I heard about what happened. I'm sorry for your loss." "We need your help," Rowan said without preamble. "If it's about the foreclosure, I'm afraid I can't." "It's about Granger. We want to bring him down properly. You said you were investigating his property deals. We want to help." Sutton leaned back in his chair. "What exactly are you proposing?" "You're looking at fraudulent transactions. We're looking at murder and arson. Together, maybe we have enough to get federal marshals involved." "That's a significant leap. Murder investigation requires evidence. We know. That's why we need to talk to Patterson's widow. You said she's been collecting information on Granger. We want to see it." Sutton was quiet for a long moment. "Even if I put you in touch with her, even if her evidence is solid, building a federal case takes time. Months, maybe years. You don't have months. The bank forecloses in 2 days." "We're not worried about the ranch right now," Evelyn said. "We're worried about justice." "Are you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you're about to be homeless. Maybe you should worry about that first." "The ranch doesn't matter if Granger's still free to destroy the next family that stands up to him." Sutton studied her carefully. "You really mean that?" "Every word." He opened a drawer and pulled out a piece of paper. "This is the last known address for Mrs. Patterson. She's living under a different name in Helena. Smart woman, careful. She won't talk to just anyone." "She'll talk to us," Rowan said. "Why would she?" "Because we're the people who didn't run when Granger came for us. That has to mean something." Sutton handed over the address. "For what it's worth, I hope you succeed. Granger's a cancer on this territory, but be careful. If he finds out you're building a case against him, he'll kill you both." "He's already tried," Evelyn said. "We're still here." They left for Helena that afternoon, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen. The ride took 2 days, and they used the time to plan. Even if Mrs. Patterson helps us, Evelyn said, even if we build a case and get federal marshals involved, it might not happen fast enough to save the ranch. I know. So we might win justice and lose everything anyway. Probably. That doesn't bother you? Rowan was quiet for a moment. A month ago it would have. Now? I don't know. The ranch mattered because it was Gideon's dream, but Gideon's gone, and maybe holding on to his dream doesn't make sense anymore. Then why fight at all? Because some things are worth fighting for even if you can't keep them. Principle, justice. The idea that people like Granger don't get to win just because they're willing to be more ruthless than everyone else. That's very noble. It's very stupid, but I'm getting used to stupid. They found Mrs. Patterson living in a small house on the outskirts of Helena. She was younger than Evelyn expected, maybe 40, with hard eyes and hands that shook when she opened the door. I don't talk to strangers, she said immediately. We're not strangers, Rowan said. We're people Granger tried to destroy, same as you. Something shifted in her expression. You're the ones from Red Hollow, the ones who stood up to him. We tried. I heard he burned your ranch, killed your friends. He did. Mrs. Patterson stepped aside. Come in. Her house was sparse and carefully organized. The windows had heavy curtains. A rifle leaned against the wall near the door. You live in fear, Evelyn said quietly. Every day. But I'm alive, which is more than I can say for my husband and children. She poured them coffee and sat down across from them. What do you want? She asked. We want to stop him, Rowan said. Properly. Legally. We want him to answer for everything he's done. The law doesn't touch men like Granger. It does if we give it enough evidence. Richard Sutton at the land office said you've been collecting information. Mrs. Patterson's laugh was bitter. Information. Yes, I have boxes of it. Forged deeds, intimidation letters, witness statements from people too scared to go public. I even have confession from one of Granger's men about how they started the fire that killed my family. She gestured at a trunk in the corner. It's all there. 2 years of my life spent documenting crimes that nobody will prosecute. Why not? Evelyn asked. Because Granger owns this territory. The judges, the sheriffs, half the businessmen. You can't fight that kind of power with paperwork. What if we brought in federal marshals? They don't care about frontier squabbles. They care about organized crime. If we can show Granger's been running a systematic operation of fraud, murder, and property theft across multiple territories, that's federal jurisdiction. Mrs. Patterson looked at Rowan like he'd lost his mind. You really think you can make this happen? I think we have to try. Why? What's in it for you? You've already lost your ranch. Not yet. We've got 2 days. But even if we lose it, Granger still needs to answer for Mary and Thomas Henderson, and your family, and everyone else he's destroyed. Mrs. Patterson stood up and walked to the window. She stood there for a long time, not speaking. If I give you this evidence, she said finally, Granger will come after me. He'll figure out where it came from, and he'll kill me. You understand that? Then come with us, Evelyn said. Testify in person. We'll protect you. You can barely protect yourselves. We're doing better than you think. Mrs. Patterson turned around. Why should I trust you? Because we're the first people who've asked for your help instead of telling you to stay quiet and stay hidden. Because we're willing to fight even when we know we might lose. Because we're the only chance you've got to see justice done for your family. For a long moment, Mrs. Patterson just looked at them. Then she walked to the trunk, opened it, and started pulling out documents. Here, take it all. But if this doesn't work, if Granger walks free, you tell everyone what happened. You make sure people know what he is. We will, Rowan promised. They loaded the trunk onto their wagon and headed back to Red Hollow. Mrs. Patterson came with them, carrying a rifle and looking like a woman who'd finally stopped running. They went straight to Sutton's office. He looked at the trunk full of evidence with wide eyes. This is extensive. It's everything, Mrs. Patterson said. Names, dates, property transfers, witness statements. Everything you need to prove Granger's been running a criminal enterprise for years. Sutton started going through documents, his expression growing darker with each page. This is enough. This is definitely enough to bring in federal authorities. How long will that take? Evelyn asked. I can send a telegram today. Federal marshals could be here within a week. We have 1 day before the bank forecloses. I can't stop that.
The foreclosure is legitimate, even if Granger's other activities aren't. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Do what you need to do. The ranch doesn't matter if Granger's still free. They spent that night in the canvas shelter, knowing it was probably their last on the property. The children were asleep. Mrs. Patterson was keeping watch with a rifle. Evelyn sat beside Rowan, watching the stars. We're going to lose the ranch tomorrow, she said. I know. After everything we fought for, everything we survived, we're going to lose it anyway. Maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes you fight and you lose, but the fighting still matters. Does it? Because right now it feels like we gave up everything for nothing. Rowan turned to look at her. You think this was for nothing? Wasn't it? No. Because of this fight, an entire town learned to stand together. Because of this fight, Granger's crimes are finally going to be investigated. Because of this fight, 2 orphaned children saw adults willing to risk everything for what's right. He paused. And because of this fight, I learned what it feels like to care about something again, to care about someone again. That's not nothing. Evelyn felt tears building. Who? You. Obviously you. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Rowan, I know the timing's terrible. I know we're about to lose everything, but I need you to know before tomorrow comes and everything changes that you matter to me. More than this ranch ever did. More than anything has in a very long time. I came here to marry your brother. I know. And now I'm falling in love with you instead, which seems wrong somehow. Is it wrong? Evelyn thought about it. About Gideon's letter and the promise that brought her west. About everything that had happened since she arrived. About the man sitting beside her who'd fought his own demons to stand with her against impossible odds. No, she said quietly. It's not wrong. It's just unexpected. The best things usually are. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. What happens tomorrow? She asked. The bank forecloses. Granger probably takes the property. We figure out where to go from there. Together? If you want. I want. They sat there holding hands while the night deepened around them. Tomorrow they'd lose the ranch, but tonight they still had each other. The bank representative arrived at noon the next day. He was apologetic but firm. The debt hadn't been paid. The property was now bank-owned and would be sold at auction. Mr. Granger has already submitted a bid, the representative said. Unless someone outbids him in the next hour, the property goes to him. How much is his bid? Rowan asked. $200. That's a fraction of what this land is worth. It's also $200 more than anyone else is offering. Rowan looked at Evelyn. They had exactly nothing. The race money was gone. The cattle were sold. They were broke. Then Sarah rode up with half the town behind her. What's going on? She asked. The bank representative explained the auction. Sarah looked at the assembled townspeople. How much do we have? People started pulling money from pockets. $5 here, $10 there. The blacksmith contributed $20. The store owner added $15. They counted it out on the porch of the ruined cabin. $140. Not enough, the representative said. Wait. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward. She pulled an envelope from her coat. My husband had a life insurance policy. It paid out after he died. I've been saving it, thinking someday I'd use it to start over. She handed the envelope to Rowan. This seems like a better use. Rowan opened it, counted. $100. He looked at Mrs. Patterson. This is your future. No, this is my past. You're building the future. She looked around at the assembled townspeople. All of you are. By standing together instead of letting Granger divide you, that's worth more than money. Rowan handed the money to the representative. $240. Do we get the ranch? The representative counted it carefully. You get the ranch. A cheer went up from the crowd. Evelyn felt something break open in her chest, relief and joy and overwhelming gratitude all mixed together. They'd won. Against everything, they'd actually won. Granger arrived 20 minutes later with his own money, ready to claim the property. His face when the representative told him he'd been outbid was almost worth everything they'd been through. Who outbid me? He demanded. The town, Sarah said. All of us together. That's not legal. The ranch goes to the highest individual bidder. Actually, the representative said, the bid was submitted by Mr. Cross on behalf of a collective.
Perfectly legal. Granger's face went dark. This isn't over. Actually, said a new voice, it is. Everyone turned. 3 men in federal marshal uniforms were riding up to the property. Silas Granger, the lead marshal said. Who's asking? Federal Marshal James Crawford. You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, arson, and murder. For the first time since Evelyn had met him, Granger looked genuinely afraid. On what evidence? On extensive evidence provided by multiple witnesses and documented by the Territorial Land Office. Crawford gestured to his men. Take him. Granger's hand moved toward his gun. 3 rifles came up immediately. Don't, Crawford said. You're already looking at hanging. Don't make it worse. Slowly, Granger raised his hands. They arrested him right there in front of everyone. Led him away in chains while the whole town watched. Evelyn found herself laughing and crying at the same time. It was over. Actually, over. Rowan pulled her into a hug, and this time it wasn't awkward. This time it felt exactly right. We did it, he said. We did it. The townspeople stayed to celebrate. Someone brought whiskey. Someone else brought food. By evening, it felt almost like a party. Daniel and Sarah played with other children, finally smiling again. Mrs. Patterson sat with the other widows, trading stories and maybe starting to heal. The community that had rallied to save the ranch stayed to rebuild it. Over the next weeks, they worked together. The barn went up first, then a new cabin, bigger than the old one, with rooms for Evelyn and Rowan, and a space for the children until their uncle in Oregon could be contacted. It turned out the uncle didn't want them. Too many mouths to feed already, his letter said. So they stay with us? Evelyn said, reading the letter. Us? Rowan looked at her. If you want. I know we're not married. I know we barely know how to be together, but those kids need a home and we need family. I want, Rowan said. All of it. The kids, the ranch, you. All of it. Even though it's going to be hard, especially because it's going to be hard, easy things aren't worth having. They were married in the fall, with the whole town attending. It wasn't fancy. Evelyn wore a simple dress Mary had been working on before she died. Rowan wore clean clothes and actually trimmed his beard. Marshal Davies performed the ceremony. Sarah cried. The children threw wildflowers. And when Rowan kissed his bride under the Montana sky, Evelyn realized something profound. She'd come west looking for stability, for a predictable future, for safety. Instead, she'd found chaos and danger and a love that terrified her with its intensity. And it was so much better than anything she'd imagined. That winter was hard. The ranch barely produced enough to get by. Money was tight. The children had nightmares. Rowan still struggled with his demons. But they struggled together. They built something that went beyond property lines and legal deeds. They built community. They built trust. They built a life that mattered not because it was easy, but because it was earned. Mrs. Patterson stayed in Red Hollow, opening a school for the territory's children. Sarah expanded the Silver Bell into a proper hotel. The town grew slowly, built on the foundation of people who'd learned to stand together. And every time Evelyn walked to the ridge behind the barn where Gideon, Mary, and Thomas were buried, she felt grateful. Not for the tragedy, never for that, but for what the tragedy had taught her. That strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up. That love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone worth fighting for. That home isn't a place you find. It's something you build, one stubborn choice at a time. She came west a factory girl with nothing to lose. She became a rancher, a mother, a wife, a fighter. She became someone who mattered. And standing on that ridge, looking out at the valley she'd fought so hard to keep, Evelyn Mercer Cross finally understood what Gideon's letter had really been offering. Not safety, not security, not even love. Just the chance to become whoever she was brave enough to be. And she'd taken that chance with both hands and refused to let go. The frontier had tested her, broken her, rebuilt her, and she wouldn't trade any of it for the safe, small life she'd left behind, because some things are worth more than safety. Some things are worth everything. Rowan found her there as the sun set, painting the valley gold and purple. Kids are asking for you, he said. Tell them I'll be there in a minute. He stood beside her instead. What are you thinking about? How far we've come, how much we've lost, how much we've found. Regret any of it? Evelyn thought about Mary and Thomas.
about the fire and the fear and the moments she'd been sure they wouldn't survive. "Not for a second," she said. "Good, because I've been thinking about next spring. Maybe we could expand the herd, try Gideon's idea about breeding better stock." "You want to risk it? Don't we always?" She smiled. "I suppose we do." They walked back to the cabin together, where lamplight glowed in the windows and smoke rose from the chimney, where children waited and dinner was ready and a life worth living stretched out before them. It wasn't the life Evelyn had expected when she stepped off that train. It was better, because it was real. It was earned. It was fought for and bled for and built by hands that refused to give up. And as she stepped through the door into warmth and noise and the beautiful chaos of family, Evelyn realized she'd finally found what she'd been searching for all along. Not a destination, not an ending, but a beginning that felt like coming home.